period as such. How did you feel at that time about your pacifism? Did you feel that you were ever challenged about?
Well, I think that I was still very clearly a pacifist, but I had been shaken by the experiences of my friends in Germany who'd been at the relief of Belsen concentration camp, and I think realised that that Nazism presented a tremendous threat to civilization, and could see more clearly why it was that many of my friends had joined the services.
And you'd obviously got your convictions and your conscientious objections. Did you ever find that being questioned by the things that you saw?
No, I never did, no. I never had that feeling. It was after the war that I thought that maybe, well, I could see the war was a war that had to be fought. We did have people who actually left the unit. George Parsons, very well known in Bourneville, he was out in the Far East, and he saw the terrible atrocities committed by the Japanese that he thought, no, we've got to get this war finished as soon as possible. And there's only one way to do it, really. And so he left the unit and joined the army, strangely doing the same sort of thing, running transport.
Yeah.
I don't think George was ever called on to shoot anybody. I came to the view after the war, I don't think it was a very popular view though, I came to the conclusion that the Second World War was a war that had to be fought.
Yes.
There was no other way in which Hitler would have been stopped.
Your beliefs that led you to be a conscientious objector, were there any changes in those as you went experienced different situations through the war?
Well, I think there's always a quandary that you think that killing people is not the way to solve anything. But what do you do when you get people like Hitler and the rest of them? Somebody's doing something for you which you wouldn't want to do yourself. That's a bit of a puzzler. Say, always thought there's a better way of doing things.
Did you ever feel a question mark on your continuing your service with the FAU?
No, no. Now one or two did. Paul George Parsons, he joined the China convoy, and he felt that it wasn't doing any good, and he joined the army in China. Yes, I mean, he felt that he got to do something about it, but those of us who stayed in the unit felt that was the right thing to do for ourselves.
From what you saw or you heard about during the war, did you find that the war itself challenged your pacifism?
I think, obviously, yes, when we knew the truth of Auschwitz, yes, one really wondered whether, I mean, but then of course the powers that be did nothing about Auschwitz when they were told they could have bombed the line leading to it and so on. They said, oh no, quite impossible. Later on, it was found that there were, when they went to bomb some nearby town, they were photographed, they went right over Auschwitz. The 2 men escaped from Auschwitz, the only 2 that ever did. They weren't believed. You know, it was... but I must say, and then Belsen, see, that was pretty horrific. So I did find that a bit rocky, and I have to say to you, I sometimes wonder if I'd had my time over again, I would have joined the Navy on the grounds that at least you wouldn't be bombing towns, and you'd be maybe firing at other young men who had volunteered for the opposite Navy rather than women and children. All right, no logic there.
All that you saw and you heard about your experiences in the war and the effect of the war, was there anything that made you feel that pacifism maybe not have been right?
No, I mean, as I've said before, I was young, not so much older, so that, I mean, at that time, we didn't know hardly anything at all about what was happening in the concentration camps. Had we known, would it have been different? But after knowing all the horrors of Nazism, one can understand people taking arms to get rid of Nazism from the world. But even then, side by side with that, it was so very important. There was a very, very small section among us who would give a peace witness. I never questioned that.
I knew a lot about the background, about the Nazis, because I had met 2 young Germans before the war, Quakers. Came to stay in York quite separately in 1939. The parents were Quakers in the Hanover area. The father was a teacher and was put in prison because of what he was teaching. Now, they were allowed to come to Britain excepting with £10.
You didn't ever doubt your conscientious objection was the right thing for you?
Well, I couldn't possibly have been killing somebody, knowing these 2 German boys on the other side. It makes a difference, I suppose.
It was in Dunkirk, and Hitler was pushing the British army out. And I thought, I'm a pacifist. What am I going to do when Hitler comes to England? What do I do? How do I behave in an occupied country, occupied by Hitler? What do I do? What kind of person am I? Am I going to fight? Am I going to cease to be a pacifist? Am I going to go on being a pacifist? And if so, what do I do? I could only think about that.
After the war, when perhaps it became widely known what had happened in Germany, the death camps and all the horrors, did you feel, well, okay, it wasn't for me to kill people, but I can see that war in this situation was the right thing to do?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't think I had any answer to it. But I was aware, for example, of the bombing of Dresden, firebombing, so that men, women and children found them isolated in pools between fires all round and roasted to death. How you could ever justify that, I can't answer.
How mankind can be so callous, I can't understand.
I think a great many people had the same sort of crisis. You see what the Nazis had done and so on, made us doubt the rightness of the stand we'd made. I think we were all very thankful that the Nazis had been defeated. I still think that somebody had to make a stand and, as we used to say, bear witness. I think it's very important. I mean, obviously this fits very much with medicine. As a doctor, you look after people regardless who they are or what they are. But as a duty as a doctor. And you can't get out of that. But you don't want to do any harm. The Hippocratic view is do no harm.
You'd come over from England to eventually to Germany, and you saw Hamburg, you saw Berlin. How did you feel about what you saw, the consequences of war in those cities and in around?
Well, it just reinforced the horror of war, and the fact that this isn't a way of settling disputes, this is inhumane, and so on. So I think it reinforced the pacifism for most of us. It may not have done for all. I mean, there were a few members in the FAU who, after a time, decided to join the army. And I think there were a few members of the armed forces who, I don't know if they joined the FAU, but who became pacifists during the war as a result of their experience. It's a terrible dilemma, and it still is. It's a great dilemma for me. What does one do? We didn't know, of course, for a long time about the extermination camps and gas chambers. But even when we knew, or even if we'd known earlier, is it going to help them people to wage war? Or was that only possible because war was being waged? Would perhaps many of the German commanders have revolted against that sort of thing if it hadn't been for the fact that their country was at war? And I find this dilemma now, for instance, with the so-called Islamic State. Should we go to war to try to defeat that? Then we're just perpetuating the idea that the way to progress is through force. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
What led you to your change of mind?
I had a fight with somebody.
Before you had the fight with somebody, did you have doubts before?
Oh yes, yes. I'm one of the least pacific people it's possible to imagine, and I'm not a natural pacifist at all. No, I always had doubts. I mean, to be very serious about it, I mean, I was at school with boys, one boy in particular whose father had been murdered by the Nazis, and all this rubbish about not knowing what was going on. We knew what was going on. They didn't know about the extent of the extermination camps which they came up. But everybody who read the newspapers or had any sense at all in the 30s knew that the Nazis were trying to do their worst to Jewish people. And if ever there was a war that wanted to be fought, it was that one, in my opinion, and still is. I feel quite strongly about it.
But you still registered as a CO?
Yeah.
And
followed the course you did,
Yeah.
and you had your doubts while you were serving in the FAU in China,
Yeah.
and then what happened?
Well, on this, what happened was that the Chinese army, with a few exceptional units which were kept in special places, consisted of ill-shod peasants, sometimes roped one to the other, and we would pass them slogging along the road on the way from somewhere to somewhere else. And on this particular day, I was driving my truck down from Chongqing to Guiyang, and I met another of our trucks coming the other way, and we both stopped for a chat. And as we were chatting, some of these Chinese soldiers tried to get on board my truck, and our policy was not to give lift to the Chinese army, because it was difficult enough on charcoal with whatever load we had without adding to it. And I got involved in a fight with these soldiers to get them off. And that was it.
So, was your decision then based on was it based on your personal feeling that you would express your aggression in that way, or was it different to that?
No, I felt that it was ridiculous to claim that I was a pacifist.